13 mind-boggling facts about Legendary's Mad Max trilogy, pioneer of the post-apocalyptic Carmageddon genre. George Miller was a novice filmmaker before he made Mad Max in 1979. The initial budget for the film was so low that Miller and producer Byron Kennedy had to pay and bribe the cast and crew with beer crates.
Save it. I'm just here for the gasoline.
However, in the end, the film turned out to be a masterpiece that not only changed the way people made and watched action flicks, but also influenced other films, animation, and video games. Even music videos like Don't Lose My Number and California Love took heavy inspiration from Mad Max.
If it's all the same to you, I'll drive that tanker.
However, what makes Mad Max a better anthology than its imitations is the fact that it has risen from being a cult classic to a popular entity. To honor this, we're going to be taking a look at 13 mind-boggling facts you may not have known about the original Gibson-Miller trilogy. Before we get into the explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click from you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. Let's begin.
If you're lucky, you can hack through your ankle in 5 minutes. Go.
Number 1. Mel Gibson was discovered by Miller after a bar brawl. What's the first film that comes to your mind when you hear the name Mel Gibson? For most of us, it's either Mad Max or Lethal Weapon, though some relate him to more critically acclaimed cinema like Braveheart. Now, this is a small part of Gibson's grand resume, but the man had very humble beginnings. His debut film, Summer City, earned him a mere $400 in 1977. So, it is an established fact that Gibson is one of the most acclaimed action heroes of the 80s and the 90s. His hothead nature was the charm of his character in the Lethal Weapon and the Mad Max anthologies, but hot blood ran through his veins in his youth. In fact, he got the lead role in Mad Max due to one of his brawls.
Friend off because he'd been called in for an audition, so I drove him, dropped him.
The night before he accompanied a friend of his to the Mad Max auditions, he got caught up in a fight with half a rugby team at a bar.
Half a rugby team, and it didn't work out too well on my end.
As such, he was black and blue when he arrived. Mad Max was all about freaks, and the crew took pictures of Gibson and asked him to come back when he had recovered from his wounds.
Congratulations. You're the first to survive the audition.
When Gibson returned, director George Miller offered him the role of the Spot for the 1979 film for a sum of $15,000.
I had about 3 months before I was to work in a hospital, and so
Number 2. Director George Miller worked as a part-time doctor to get funds. Director George Miller studied medicine at the University of New South Wales, and in 1972, he completed his residency at Sydney's St. Vincent's Hospital. However, Miller loved being behind the lens, even as a child. While he was studying, he joined a film workshop organized by Melbourne University, and when he was not working as a doctor, he would spend his time making short, experimental films.
where I met my partner, Byron Kennedy, and we started making experimental films.
This doctor-director took the reins of Mad Max, but his friend and producer Byron Kennedy didn't have a huge budget for Miller. The filming was completed, but there was a massive cash crunch for the editing and other things that come with post-production. To deal with this, Miller resorted to his former profession and started working as an emergency doctor for 3 months. Whenever a call for a medical emergency came, Kennedy would drive and Miller would do the doctoring. It's impossible to imagine what a gem of a movie we would have missed if things had gone south for Mad Max. But hey, where there's a will, there is a way. The final budget was somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000.
You!
Me?
You. It's your lucky day.
It is?
Number 3. George Miller and his beer bribes. It's really difficult to make a dystopian action thriller film in the middle of a hot Australian desert. One might work on goodwill, but in the end, people need money when they are laboring for you. Moreover, after slogging themselves for hours in the heat, it's natural to take some money back home. But at the time, money was a rare resource for Miller. Despite being paid, some would want to quit because of the harsh weather conditions they were filming in. He again devised a strange but effective plan of paying and bribing his crew with beer crates. Yes, the crates also had to be bought, but it's always cheaper to pay in kind than cash. And don't we all know how the Aussies love their beer? Miller bribed everyone from the ambulance and truck drivers to the people portraying the biker gangs, in addition to whatever amount they were to receive. For instance, Miller paid the truck driver $50 in a beer crate for his truck and driving. Number 4. Melbourne biking clubs who played the Toecutters gang were no less than Daredevils. You would know the bikers in the film as the actors who played them. Wherever the camera closed up, we got to see the actors, and all of them did a great job at playing the cyclists. In fact, in many of the sequences, the actors themselves rode the bikes and spread the mindless destruction that's seen in the film. However, all actors don't have enough riding experience to pull off precision stunts, and you can't have them riding in packs, chasing cars, or falling off the bikes for liability reasons. So for the bigger and more dangerous stunt sequences, they hired professional bikers from local clubs. The primary club was a Melbourne-based club called the Vigilantes. It was the Vigilantes riders who performed the Donut and Mono by the Toecutters gang in Influnce, as well as Goose's Burnout down Claremont Street. A Vigilantes rider named Dale Bench performed the bike to the back of the head stunt, but the bike skid on the wet surface and hit Dale. Fortunately, he walked out unharmed and unscathed. Other clubs such as the Victorian Four Owners Club and the Barbarians Motorcycle Club filled in when scenes with large groups of bikers needed to be shot. When it came to more dangerous stunts like jumping across Kirk's Bridge, director Miller used professional stuntmen like Grant Page and Chris Anderson. Due credit must be given to cinematographer David Egby, who would strap himself on a bike and hold the camera in his hand to shoot the high-speed chase sequences.
A terminal crazy. Only I got a bronze badge to say I'm one of the good guys.
Number 5. Americans versus the Australian accent. Let's not take it to heart, but Americans face trouble understanding English slang if it's from another country. Or at least they did back in the countries when the number of foreign-made English films was far less in number than today. It's any distributor's nightmare if the audience fails to comprehend what is being said on the screen. No matter how great the action sequences and filmmaking are, if one cannot understand what's being spoken, the film is bound to fall flat like a pancake.
Hey Max, still on your books, eh? Are you eating yet?
Nah, not yet.
So, naturally, Mad Max was redubbed into an American accent before release. Australian terminology changed entirely. Oi became hey, see looks became see what I see, windscreen became windshield, very toey became super hot, and probby became rookie.
Hey fella, stop! What a turkey.
However, there were certain actors who were exempted from the dubbing, like the singer at Sugartown Cabaret, played by Robina Chaffee. Interestingly, the redubbing was one of the reasons why the first Mad Max film didn't perform well in Australia. Secondly, it was banned in New Zealand. Number 6. Bunch on oil exporting Arab nations inspired Mad Max 2. The story of Mad Max 2 is set in a world that's torn itself through war after a global oil crisis. The world has become barbaric and everyone scavenges for food and petrol. Under these circumstances, Max Rokitansky roams the Australian wilderness to exact revenge for the gruesome murders of his family. His pursuit for petrol in this post-apocalyptic Australia leads him to a biker warrior gang called the Marauders and their leader Lord Humongous. The Marauders come as a mortal threat to a local village, but Max offers help in exchange for an unlimited supply of oil.
You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
Director Miller came up with the idea of making the oil crisis the basis of his story after the events of the oil embargo of the 70s. On October 6, 1973, Arab countries led by Syria and Egypt attacked Israel and the war went on for 6 days. After the conflict, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries imposed an embargo on the United States and other countries that seemed to be supporting Israel. Apart from imposing the embargo, they even reduced oil production, and this led to a global oil crisis. In Mad Max 2, George Miller simply transformed this event into an exaggerated global crisis that went on for decades. The film went on to earn $36 million and became the highest-grossing Australian film of the time. Number 7. Miller, Hitchcock, and the 16 Lines of Mel Gibson. If you'd remember the films made by Hitchcock, you'd realize that his works hardly need subtitles even if they're being watched in Japan or South Korea. So much visual action takes place that dialogue becomes supplementary. In an interview, Miller revealed that the legendary Alfred Hitchcock inspired him.
Do what you want.
So, despite being the lead, Mel Gibson had a total of 16 lines in the film. Mad Max 2 continued this trend by creating a vision of a future violent world without significant conversations. Number 8. The memorable but unfortunate scene of Mad Max 2. In The Road Warrior, there's a scene where a biker flies over the hood, slams into the car, and somersaults towards the camera. This was one of the most iconic scenes of the film, but it was not supposed to happen the way it did. He was supposed to slam into the car and fly over the hood and fall safely. However, in a freak accident, the biker lost control of his body and met with a terrible accident that broke his leg and almost took his life. George Miller found the scene to be authentic and chose to keep the shot. If you look at the stuntman's body frame by frame through his cartwheels, you can see that one of his legs is bending at a slightly unnatural angle around the knee. Number 9. Lord of the Flies and the Nobel Prize winner's influence on Beyond Thunderdome. The third and final installment of the Mad Max series starring Mel Gibson revolves around children and how Max helps them. The Nobel Prize-winning British author William Golding wrote the novel The Lord of the Flies in 1954. It deals with a group of British children who get stranded on a remote island and their disastrous attempts at governing themselves. Miller revealed in a 1985 interview that the inspiration for Thunderdome came from the strange thought of Golding's novel. George Miller and writer Terry Hayes were talking about some philosophical things, like how people with limited knowledge tend to be grand on their beliefs and rituals. He went on to give the example of native Australian tribes. Then they quickly thought about children in the post-apocalyptic world. Children don't really have a fair idea about how the world works, and they only possess basic ideas about core concepts like democracy, science, and polity. If an abandoned group of children were left to fend for themselves, they were bound to fall short on knowledge and fall back on rudimentary beliefs. And it was Terry who suggested the impact of someone like Max on the children, someone who has seen a lot more world than they did and who can help them destruct their blind beliefs and rely on empirical knowledge.
I'll steal. It'll take you 10 minutes to hack through it with this.
Number 10. The Saw franchise saw its beginning through Mad Max. James Wan and Leigh Whannell brought the first Saw film in 2004 and started a revolution in the way horror films were made and viewed. They really relished and respected the genre, and their film is nothing less of a tribute to horror films of past and future alike. However, the inspiration for the film came from Mad Max. Both have similar endings where a man is chained to an immovable object. Max chains the villain to his wrecked car and tells him he will have to hack off his foot instead to survive.
You're bad, man. You think I look silly, don't you?
Furthermore, the essence of Saw remains primarily through the loss of innocence and seclusion from the world, and we all know how Max travels through the wilderness of post-apocalyptic Australia while fending for himself and surviving. Both Wan and Whannell grew up in Australia, and their local blockbuster clearly influenced them. Number 11. The Great Dog Named Dog. Max adopted an Australian cattle dog after he lost his family and left for exacting his revenge. The real story behind this dog is very fascinating. After looking for several dogs, Miller finally got one in a dog pound. The dog was supposed to be euthanized a day before Miller adopted him. Usually, adopted dogs are hostile towards people, but this one was very playful and friendly. Miller chose him after he fetched a stone that Miller had thrown and brought it back to Miller. But the dog was not ready for acting, as it was scared of the loud engine noises and showed no traits of aggressiveness or barking. Miller solved these issues using smart camera techniques and putting cotton in the dog's ears. The dog was to attack Bruce Spence's character Gyro Captain, but the dog wouldn't attack, so they played keep away with the Gyro Captain's scarf until the dog became conditioned to jump at the scarf. This gave the impression that it was jumping at Gyro Captain to attack him. Number 12. Beyond Thunderdome almost didn't happen because of an unexpected demise. Mad Max 2 was a huge commercial and critical success, and usually such a film calls for a sequel. But George Miller was in a fix because he lost his longtime friend and colleague Byron Kennedy. Miller and Kennedy met in 1971 at Melbourne University, and they formed Kennedy-Miller Productions in 1978. Their friendship was special because it didn't start because of work, rather their work together started because of their friendship. They went on to produce several films together. Byron died tragically when the helicopter that he was flying crashed. This incident left a mark on Miller, and his initial reaction was to step away from filmmaking. However, as time passed, he recovered from the grief and took the filmmaking reins once again. The production company then went on to make blockbusters like the Happy Feet anthology and renamed itself Kennedy Miller Mitchell. Clearly, Miller honors his late friend's legacy. Number 13. Fury Road was to be made in the 90s. Miller had become a master of Mad Max films and wanted to make another one in the 90s itself. The pre-production started in 1997 but stretched to early 2000. And then, the tragic events of 9/11 and the Iraq War happened. This halted production for a long time because the location that was chosen was in Namibia, and the war enforced several travel restrictions. When things finally seemed to come back on track, more tragedies followed, and the sequel was delayed further. Miller considered the legendary Heath Ledger, but his sad, sudden, and untimely demise made a hole in the filming process, and this hole would later be filled by another veteran in the form of Tom Hardy. Finally, the filming started in 2012, and Mad Max Fury Road starred Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron. Mad Max fans around the world would be delighted to know that 2 sequels named Mad Max The Wasteland and Furiosa are in the pipeline and are scheduled to release in 2023.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.